Hey everyone, it's Brian here, and welcome to the Mental Musician Podcast. Now, it feels inevitable that we were going to do an episode about AI in music, as, after all, there's no escaping it. It's already a big part of our lives, let alone in the music industry. So, we're going to have a slightly different format for today's episode, as my friend Michael Wright is going to host the show. I mean, he's been on so many episodes up until this point, I might as well just hand the reins over to him. When we were planning this episode together, we both decided to leave out any discussions about the legality of AI in music and not talk too much about the logistical side of it. Instead, we wanted to talk honestly about how AI has impacted our careers as musicians, share our genuine opinions for and against, and explore how AI could potentially help musicians manage their mental health and build a sustainable living without burning out. After all, the show is called The Mental Musician, and there's so many different aspects of the music industry that affects our mental health in music, and that includes AI. So before we get into the episode, I want to give Michael a huge shout out, as he's been incredibly encouraging, always supporting me, and whenever I have doubts about episode topics like today, he always says to me, just back yourself and believe in what you want no matter what. So let's get into today's episode, and after you listen to the show, let us know your thoughts. Do you think AI has a place in music? And if so, or if not, why? Let us know, reach out. So welcome back, Mike. And as I've been saying pretty much every episode since the first one, it's not really welcome back, it's just hello, because you're a big part of this podcast. A big reason as to why I started the podcast, or finally got me going to get the podcast. And, one day I will pay you more than what musicians have been paid for about a century,
Will I
maybe I
get
will,
paid
yeah.
will I get paid more than Daniel Ek pays, artists on Spotify? Because if that's the case, I'll look forward to my 0.0001 penny, and I'll treasure it, and I'm gonna put it in the savings account, and it's gonna grow to 0.001. So if that's the case, Brian, don't get my hopes up, because I'm really looking out for that decimal number. I really am.
No, just send me your invoice and I'll sort you out by 2041, when we finally have a way to balance AI music with real music, or when the robots fully take over.
Yeah, and the time difference between Australia and the UK, it's
It'll
gonna
take a
take
while, yeah.
it'll take a while, won't it? Yeah, because you're gonna be sending that invoice, or I'll send the invoice via like a little boat, and I'm gonna push it out of the North Sea. I think the North Sea, yeah. And I'm basically just gonna go, 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 go on your journey. And yeah, so it will take a long time, but that, hey, good things are worth the wait, aren't they? Good things come to those who wait, as the saying goes. So there we are.
Yeah, of course, of course. Hopefully by then, the UK will still be part of the Commonwealth. I know it's been a few years removed from the EU. Make your way to the Pacific region, Asia Pacific region. Stop by Samoa. Dwayne Johnson says hi, and then we'll see how things go. But you know, we mentioned AI, and it was about time we were going to do an episode on AI. Just as a very, very, very clear disclaimer, this whole episode is done by AI. We're
Uh-huh.
not real. At
Uh-uh.
least my life's not real. My whole life is imaginative. Kind of like those mime artists, actually. I don't know if Mike's real. I don't know if our friendship is real. I don't know if air is real either.
I mean, it's a hard one, because, really I have to look at the algorithms in terms of the friendship, and I've crunched the numbers, and there's a couple of zeros and ones which aren't where they should be. So I'm guessing that actually we've been imagining what we think is real, but actually this has been a deep fake relationship, and I've been speaking to deep fake George Washington for how long, and George has been speaking to deep fake beardy Matt Damon for how long. So it's yeah, I mean, it's sorry to break it to you, mate, but but hey, look how sophisticated AI is now, that it's become meta, more meta than it is. So
You're so lifelike. I mean, I like Matt Damon, and he lives in Australia now these days, I think. Or is that
Does
Mark
he?
Wahlberg? You know, who knows? They're kind of the same person, Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon. Yeah, so who knows? Who knows? I'm actually Jackie Chan's 15th cousin. So that's a nice little bombshell, actually. So now we're going to do something a little bit different in today's episode. Not just being fake AIs and we're just mock-ups. This is all VR, AR, all that sort of stuff. VAR and the World Cup at the moment. But Mike is actually going to take over. He didn't ask me to, and I didn't ask him to. It was just natural. It was always going to happen. No, I asked Mike if he wanted to run the next show. Let's talk about AI. Let's talk about the impact that AI has on the mental health of musicians over the last few years, currently, and our thoughts on how things are going to go in the future. And yeah, in all seriousness, he took a lot of time to come up with a plan thoroughly. He's written today's episode. We're still going to do our usual shit talk. There's probably going to be more ranting and shit talking than ever because both of us are a bit, like most people, hesitant and a bit, don't know about the future of music. But we're going to try to give both sides because there needs to be a balance. There are pluses for AI in the world, not just in music. There's also concerns and negatives. So, and it's a good time for Mike as well because, and this is sort of like a little sneak peek and a little. We're getting the early mail late, and we're going to get the late mail early. Mike's going to launch his own show very, very soon. Very soon, or late, very late. I don't know. I don't know.
Probably be very late knowing me. It's like, "Oh, I've got an idea." And then it will sit there and then I go, "Oh, what about that idea?" And then it would like it's almost like it will just happen. Like knowing me, it will just happen in one creative burst. So, yeah, probably very late, but I will try my best to be reasonably early in terms of the idea.
Yeah, with the time zones, it'll be early, so don't worry.
Mm.
All right, Mike. So I'll let you start off, and hopefully everyone you enjoy what we're going to talk about today, and share your thoughts in the comments. Share it with your friends if you're pissed off, if you're angry, if you agree, disagree, or you just have your own take because it's the hot topic of today. The most important thing we can talk about in the world today is AI,
A
all that
IA.
stuff. Yeah,
IA is really, really important, Ryan. Thank you so much for that. So the title, You Can Call Me AI. Um, and yes, it is an intentional typo. It was inspired by a student of mine. I laugh now. I inspired about a student of mine who was in year 10, first year of the 2 years when they're doing the exams. And one of the exam boards at the time, we had to learn four pieces of music, and we basically deep dived into the pieces of music, and as part of their exam element of the GCSE music program course, they had to study it. So my first lesson with them, I just started the school, and I had on the board, You Can Call Me Al, because we were looking at three songs from Paul Simon's Graceland, one of my all-time favorite albums. Now, I've done something similar before where I've had the title on or we've played, and but this particular time, the student just called out all of a sudden, "Oh, you could call me AI." And I looked, and all the students looked at him like, "What?" And he was convinced that, "Oh, why is it called You Can Call Me AI?" So it's a little pun on the great song as well. But every time I read read that, I think, "Oh my goodness." So yes, we're going to be discussing. We're going to be deep diving, as Brian said, in terms of AI, the use and advent of AI in music, in particular, the
deep fakes.
positives,
Yeah,
deep fakes, absolutely, the positives, the negatives of AI. You know, as Brian said, there are, it's not all. We can't just wag our finger at AI and say naughty, naughty. There are some positives in there, so we're going to be broad and balanced. Potentially some apps that can help. So we're not sponsored by anyone yet, but we can kind of give you an insight into what apps are actually pretty good, in terms of helping, us as creatives. We're going to look at its impact on music now, actually, as well. So, what's happening right now, or at least in the last couple of years, how it's changed the landscape and how it's changed the public's perception, and things into the future. Potential pushback as well. So, there are things that have been popping up, certainly on my social media, in regards to AI, not just in music, but AI generally. And also the younger generation, the new generation, how they're going to live with it, really. So we'll try to explain everything we possibly can in a broad and balanced way. And then, of course, if we need to explain why you can call me AI, not you can call me Al, we can do that as well. So I'm well versed in this conversation. I've had this before. So if we need to do that again, Brian, then we can actually do that there. So
Yeah, Al Yankovic, yeah.
yes, absolutely. You can call me Weird Al Yankovic there. Oh, we could have called it, I missed a trick. We could have done that, couldn't we? I could have got the accordion out and everything. Ah, well, maybe another time. Maybe another time. Shout out to Weird Al Yankovic. Amazing. So right now, what is AI? What is AI's role in music as we stand, or rather as we sit doing this podcast? What is AI's role in music, Brian? What do you see AI's influence in music?
I think the most important thing that AI is doing now is getting rid of the shit music. No, no, it isn't.
No, that
It's
still
always
exists.
good to, yeah, it's always been around. It's always good to start on a lighter note, isn't it? No, my view on AI is somewhat in a bubble because when it comes to the logistics of it, the copyright laws, I guess the engineering behind it, blockchains, NFTs, all that sort of stuff, I don't quite have my head wrapped around that. But for me, I see AI as a tool, and I'm sure that's something that every person, whether they're an artist, musician, record label, manager, whoever, that whenever they say AI is a tool, that tends to be the main positive argument as to why AI is a good thing, right? For me, it's a way to sort of remove all the fringes and all the friction between one getting started in music. Let's say you got a young kid, 10, 12 years old, and let's say their parents can't afford to pay for lessons, right? Now, of course, you got YouTube there. You got YouTube. You got plenty of people writing, making YouTube videos, and whether it's guitar, singing, jazz, whatever. But having an app, having a program where you can type in, okay, I want to learn my first four chords or whatever, to remove that friction and just give them a little starting point, right? Now, the
Mm,
argument against that is that, well, what if is that really learning? Is that really copying? Well, I think that question has always been there for the last 20 years. Like you can buy a music sheet, you can buy a guitar tab on the internet and just chuck it in front of the kid, um, download a video or buy a DVD, and the kid does that. The friction can be removed.
mm,
From a learning point of view in the beginning, I think given how quickly things are moving, the fast-paced nature, technology, social media really just flooding the minds of young kids. Having something that still gets them learning music, I see it as a good thing. Yes, it's not the way that I learnt it or you learnt it, Mike, or people learnt it 40 years ago, but they're still learning it. Um, to veer away from music, sport is in a similar situation at the moment. Maybe not quite at the same crossroads, but the kids now go on YouTube and watch. They have AI prompts, whether it's on their on their Garmin's, smartwatches, Apple Fitbits. The AI coaches apps gives them a whole fitness plan. You still see fitness coaches and personal trainers still thriving. So on that front, what it does is, like I said, it removes the friction. It brings more kids, young people learning music, or gives people opportunities to learn music in the beginning who can't afford to to pay someone to do it, and that's a
mm.
real challenge. Now
Yeah.
on the paying someone in the financial side, you know, having, let's say, whether it's ChatGPT, I mean, I'll just throw that out there, or eventually a music specific app. You know, let's say you have someone who's just about to finish high school and they have ambitions to want to be a pro musician, right? And they got to do, they got to go play gigs, they got to market themselves, and they got to get their music out, record, all that sort of stuff. Now, one thing that was hardly, if ever, taught in previous generations was how to manage yourself, how to be your own administrator. And that's something that kids now or young musicians now are learning. The question is, well, they can't afford to do all that. Like, are you going to hire a manager? Are you going to hire a tour manager, a gig manager, social media manager? Well, no, like you just can't afford that. So
Right.
having a tool like ChatGPT, just simple, say, help me come up with a administrative schedule, help me schedule out everything, a tour planner, yearly planner, just keeping it simple like that. So, and financial planner, budget control, these are things that right now AI can teach young musicians to better prepare themselves for the stresses, the relentless pressure of being a professional musician,
Mm.
or even being in music college or university. So, of course, that we're not. Well, I'm sure we'll get into the conversation of, okay, owning music and, you know, Spotify streaming and copyright laws, but at least that for me moves into the music business side of things. AI is a part of that, but yeah, it's a tough one for me because is it the way that people like it to be done? Well, that's where I think, well, if you don't like it or you like it, or that's not really an argument. That's more an emotional thing. But yeah, I'm trying to be as objective as possible. But yeah, what do you think, Mike?
You're spot on. Firstly, with the point of musicians, families who cannot afford the extra um, uh, lessons, they can't afford a manager, they can't afford, at the probably stage of your career to really look at getting a distributor, et cetera, et cetera. So AI, you're absolutely spot on, is a very, very good leveler for people who don't have the financial backing to see if they can, uh, create a tour, design a tour, or if they're doing an album or an EP launch, or even if it's students, young people, whoever it is, want to start learning an instrument and they can't quite afford the lessons. AI can come into, well, I'd say AI and probably forward slash YouTube or whatever it is can come into its own when you have online, lessons. So in many ways, yes, it is a good leveler and it can help tremendously, certainly when you're dealing with something like booking a tour. If you've got the right prompts and you're very thorough with it, it's absolutely amazing. And then you can literally auto generate anything, can't you? You can auto generate responses to venues, etc., etc. So that works perfectly well. Which is what, when it first became mainstream, that was the idea. Is like, actually, this is meant to benefit us. This is something that we can use just to help us on the day to day. And in the music industry, it was kind of seen as that. What else? There's also things like, even I tried was it the other day? I both think I was looking at something like when I was writing an improvisation article. I've run out of. I had a fair amount of things on my list of what improvisation can be used for in terms of genres and styles, but I just thought, well, I'm just going to put in a prompt to see if I've missed anything, and it came up with at least 5 more styles or genres that I hadn't considered, out of the um, Western music sphere. So that's great. So it's good in that way to kind of prompt things, or even though if I'm too lazy to go over my notes from conservatoire, I can just go in and say, well, how else can I, play over this 2-5-1? However, I say that there is a really famous organist, jazz organist. What's his name? He's really funny. Larry, the name rings a bell. It's just falling out of my head. So apologies there. But anyway, he's an incredibly funny person, and he does a lot of these parodies. And I think he's got a parody jazz teacher persona called Hans Gruber or something like that. And he puts on this dodgy silver wig, and I think for those who know it, it's hilarious. Like he's absolutely spot on. But he's got a couple of videos where he's prompting chat GTP, GP chat GB chat TP, that thing. He's got a couple of prompts for that, and he goes in and he's really knowledgeable, and I think they're talking about turnaround, and he says, well, okay, how can I play this turnaround or this jazz standard? And the responses he gets back from chat GTP, I can't even speak today, is hilarious, because it's not even generic. Like, he's putting in some responses like, well, could I maybe do like a minor plagal turnaround instead of this one, or would you suggest I perhaps put the tritone sub in there? Like, he's going very, very specific. And the prompt is, yeah, absolutely, you can do whatever you want, whatever you feel. And he's goading it more, going, okay, what about this? It's hilarious. So in many, many aspects, AI is blooming useless when it comes to this one, in terms of help. My experience of it, though, has been somewhat okay, because I've prompted in something like, how many other scales can I play over like a minor chord vamp, other than the ones that I've known? And it's come up with some interesting ones. But again, it's only good if you know. So if you know what to put in and it shows you the scale, then you're like, oh, okay, that's what I need to do. So yes, it's got its benefits, which are, documented, but it's also got its limitations. And obviously, without going into the bad things, which I think are fairly well known in terms of AI's influence, it cuts a lot of time. There's mixing and mastering assistants. You've got apps that can literally mix your record or your song and master it as well. I mean, it still blows my mind that you can actually have music generated. Like, you type in a prompt and the algorithms create a whole track, which is scary. And obviously we'll go into how scary it is for composers and such. But you've got things in there which can help prompt ideas. So it's, as a tool, yes, absolutely amazing. But because it's now become so ubiquitous with how we do things, and businesses have clearly cottoned on that they can save a whole heap of cash by, outsourcing AI, makes it a little bit more tetchy when it comes to the obvious thing, which is, AI replacing us and replacing what we do. And at once before, it was perhaps limited industries. But like you said, with sports coaching, like, even that now is entered into the phrase. So you've got AI coach, so who can help with various things. So it's got its worrying dystopian factor in that one. Speaking of actually dystopia, so the thing that I find with AI, as I mentioned, is the writing of the songs. And there's a couple of apps which I've played around with. One called Producer, which is like Suno, but actually a little better. It's a little bit more intuitive. It's brilliant. It's fantastic. If you put the prompts in, they're incredible. But that means that in the 2 minutes it's taken to generate a song, I'm like, wow, okay. So I don't need to write anything anymore. I don't need to compose anything. And I think with some of the apps, it can even give you the stems as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, it might even give you the MIDI data. So, like, okay, so that's interesting. Now, obviously, with the top composers, so I've got a good friend of mine who's a amazing composer, works for film and TV. I think for the likes of him, he should be all right, because he's an amazing composer, and he's getting companies come to him, or films, or directors go in and say, write us this, or we've got an advert coming up, write us this. Absolutely phenomenal. He will be fine. But for those composers on the up, they're competing against a market that's doing it. And also, you mentioned Spotify, the amount of AI music which is flooding streaming channels, you know? I think when I heard the couple of the Weekend and Drake's AI generated music, I'm like, okay, this might well be the future, you know. And then I think
Mm.
Warner Brothers was scrambling for copyright and trying to basically stop it. Um, which now, ironically, Warner Brothers have cut a deal with Suno in terms of that one. So nothing untoward there, of course. um, but yeah, AI generated music, the fact that it exists is a huge, huge worry, and I'm not particularly um, clear on the data, Brian, but you know, hundreds of thousands of AI generated tracks are flooding the streaming platforms, which you know gives the real artists, the human artists, an incredibly unfair uh, disadvantage because they're trying to compete and promote and trying to get you know people to listen to the songs. They're not getting that. I mean, considering that they're not getting paid much anyway, it becomes rather bleak, doesn't it? I mean, what are your thoughts on AI music flooding streaming sites and how they've been promoted?
I know I don't have any care for generated music at the moment, like listening to it or anything. Like you, Mike, I'm concerned about the actual person. Whether that's the the up and coming artist or the middling artist. And when I say up and coming and middling, not those who aren't good, just those who aren't making already super successful. And people like Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, though, big pop stars, they don't need Spotify. It's about those who are indie bands, and yeah, that's a huge concern. And for me, it all comes down to, I know it's cliche to say, but it's time and money, just away from Spotify for a moment, but anything that allows a business, a large corporation to save an extra minute, extra time, and make an extra dollar, they will take it. That's the world we live in. It's been the way for 20 to 30 years, and right now, over the last maybe 5 years, it's happening faster than perhaps the first 25 years or whatever. At the start of the century, but yeah, it's you know I guess that's the from a cultural point of view, young artists who want to build a career, want to actually go out and perform. I'm I'm sure they feel that pressure of having to feel like I'm sure they feel the pressure of "Uh, I got to write an album, I got to write 1,000 songs or whatever. And if I don't do it within a week or 2 weeks, then there's going to be 100 other artists that you know go ahead of me. So that's why they turn to the generative systems and softwares, because now some might be doing it because they're lazy, but uh, I dare say I reckon the majority are doing it because they just feel that pressure. And you see
Mm.
what's going on Spotify and the generative music. I'm trying to remember. There's a video that I watched explaining how um, playlists are now being made up of AI generated music, pushing out artists who wrote human made music. And there are artists specifically hired by Spotify who only create generative music. Now, my sources are just by reading articles and all that, and Spotify will probably, if you read anything from their spokesmen and everything, they'll probably deny it. But um, at this stage, it's what put it this way, the music that you listen to in shopping malls and shopping centers, it will be within 5 years, maybe 10 max. Now, I say 5 years where the majority of music you'll hear in shopping malls and centers will either be from the big pop stars like Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, those types, or AI generated music. You're never going to hear, maybe not never, but you're probably never going to hear some young star who's just coming out. You're never going to hear some random playlist that was created by a human. It's just what's there. Shopping malls, shopping centers. They won't have to pay the rights to the young artists and all that. And that's concerning. Now I'm sure you're gonna get big films, you're gonna get big Hollywood blockbusters that will have AI music. Maybe the smaller indie films will still have, real music by real people, and that's a good thing. But if a film is not filmed and directed by Christopher Nolan, yeah, we might be struggling to hear some real music, So look, to try to, I'm trying to be positive about it as well, and I think over the next half an hour of this ep, we're gonna just shit on it. We'll get there, but yeah, I want to say there's a place for AI generated music or art, and the reason for that is because it it challenges what is human created art. It challenges us to get better and to try to create music, art, craft that speaks more to the human emotions, the human experiences. Now, eventually, I see a future in a few years where AI generated music is not art, it's just pure business. It's there to make money, people will understand it, and that's the objective purpose of it. And there'll be a side of the music community or community as a whole, society as a whole that says, all right, we know what real music is, and we're going to listen to the music that we love, or go see the music that we love, or go see films that has music that we love, and we can tell the difference.
Yeah.
The one thing right now is that it's so early on. I know it feels like it's been around for centuries and forever, but we're still only maybe 5 or 6 years into this constant push and pull, and
Mm.
it's probably going to go on for a few. It's going to go on for a few more years. But to be optimistic, as optimistic as I can, there's going to be a future where eventually we'll find out what is a clear difference. It's not going to be completely black and white, but the wider society, non-musicians, and the general music goer will be able to tell the difference. And
Mm.
that's something maybe that's wishful thinking. You know, was that song written by AI? I don't know. We will find out.
Yeah. Fair point. Absolutely fair point there. And I was reading up a particular stat that actually there are a fairly big minority of the general public which are rejecting AI music, or at least rejecting it for the sake of listening to it for enjoyment, for art. There are people that are rejecting it. There's a couple of viral clips of at the graduation ceremonies, some CEO of an AI company went in and said AI is the future and got booed out of the building. And there's a few of those. So the new generation are looking at it and going, no thanks, because you're basically saying we're going to go into a world where we don't have a job. It's hard enough at the moment with the current economy. Now, things are really tough. I don't know what it's like in Australia, but at this current stage, the economy's not in a great state. And in education, we've basically reached the beginning of critical mass in terms of we've been telling you it's been rubbish, and here we are. Now we're in a really, we're beginning to get into a really dire situation. So there are people already rejecting AI for on the grounds of we don't want to be out of a job, and we want to be able to earn a living. We want to be able to have a career, earn a living. We want to do that, and that's great because people are voting with their feet or voting with their wallets. And as sad as it is, there are going to be people who are going to lose a lot of income. That, I'm afraid, will probably happen. But on the other side, there will be another market for people who would want to hear human music and human endeavors, and they want to see the artists developing. But you've raised a very, and this is a very interesting point, and I know Michelle Ann has spoken about this at great lengths. The middle ground. So you've got the AI, and then you've got your top end artists who are secure, they're top of the mountain, their careers are fine, right? But then you've got the artists in the middle, like mid-tier, lower mid-tier, upper mid-tier, who are trying to move up. Um, they're they are the ones that I really worry about, because there's a recent trend that's been they've observed at Glastonbury, that I think they've noticed that out of the last like 5 years, legacy artists and bands have been headlining the pyramid stage, and they were basically lamenting the fact that why don't we have new artists come in and establish themselves on a global stage so they can take over, and we don't have to be relying on hologram Freddie Mercury, singing the Radio Gaga. Do you know what I mean? So that's a worry. Although I think Glastonbury have addressed that, and they've put on some newer acts on the pyramid stage, in terms of promoting, which is great. But still, there's still the point of, the new artists, the ones that are really trying to break into the mainstream and trying to, take the mantle, like you and I were used to. When you grow up with music, you listen to music in the past, the present, and then potential future. So there's that worry. But I think the recording industry tried it. My conspiracy theory tin hat tells me that all of this leaked music of Drake, The Weeknd, whoever artists, I don't know if Taylor Swift was in there, but certainly Drake and The Weeknd are the more prominent ones. This whole, oh, where did this come from? Oh, how naughty. Oh, they're bad. They've released this song. Oh, it's so good, but it's so wrong. It's AI. I think they were testing the water to basically see public reaction. And yes, the first reaction is, my word, that is awesome. Um, I find it quite funny that the AI Drake is better than the real one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for any Drake fans, but Winter's Cold, wait, that is a tune. And I listen to that and I go, damn, that's better than, almost better than some of the things Drake put out. Not that he cares. I think he's wiping away his tears in the $1 billion or whatever he has. So who am I to say? But they tried it. I think they've been trying to test the water, and the public are like, nah, sorry, we want our real artists. So I think it's going to separate in terms of that one. So that's a good thing. That's a good thing that already now the distinguishing barriers are there. Will it stop it entirely? No. And like you said, we're 5 years in and we're already going, this is horrible. But I've been reliably informed that when the typewriter came out, people were worried that people's handwriting skills and motor skills would suffer. We still handwrite. We don't do it as much as we'd like to, but we still do it. When Pro Tools came out and auto-tune, that would be the death of the singer. And perhaps for a certain period of time it was, because everything was auto-tuned to high on hills. But because the algorithms and auto-tuners develops significantly, so no artist doesn't necessarily sound like T-Pain or Cher. It's done to the point where it's fairly discreet. But even then, singers still sing, and singers still need to learn how to phrase and everything. So there are various technological things that have come out, which we all go, we're a bit worried. But the reality is that it will settle into a middle ground. And I think it's probably the future that you're going to have um, plant-based meat and real meat. You're going to have EV cars, and you're still going to have some like hybrid or petrol diesel engines. You're going to have this split between, you can have this or you can have this. And I think that will probably be the fairer thing for the two camps to coexist. And certainly in music, that should be the case. Same in music education. The technology that's been used in music education, I would say over the last 20 years have grown significantly, but there'll still be an element of music technology and non-music technology. There will still be music departments that will have manuscripts, writing down, and there will be music departments which will use apps, computers to make music. And it will just really be up to the people who run whatever it is to decide we can use it or we don't use it, or we use a hybrid. And that for me might sound more optimistic, but I think it's the only way that it really can help us in terms of how we use AI. Speaking of kind of the usage, Brian, I mean, there's an app that I was again, I'm terrible with names. Like I had the names before the chat, and now I completely forget. I'm getting old. Yeah, well, I could just make it up. Yeah, this mastering app called Splurge. A great app it is. You put it in, you type in the code, and Splurge does its thing. Splurge is an incredible mastering app. It's the best in the market. In fact, Splurge is so memorable. It really is. It's not called Splurge, but there's this app that I was
No.
so I tell you what. Years ago, when I was working in one of my first schools, I was lucky enough to um, visit twice Metropolis Studios, which is a big studio in London. It's one of the most world famous studios. It's premier, like it's the who's who of who records there, right? It's the big one. And I had a friend of mine as the mastering engineer there, who's now moved on to LA and does his work out there. So, kind of, yeah, I know. I've known him for such a long time. So it's one of those ones where I said, "Hey, look, Pete, I need a favor. I've got some students in here. We're doing like they're doing a music technology coursework, and do you know what? I think it'd be great if they actually go into a studio and you can explain to them a process of mixing and mastering." So very fortunate to have that situation. We're going to Met Studios, and he shows us around, and it's incredible. And he takes us into the various control rooms and the mixing suites where they do their thing, and they've got the Dolby 5.1 sound, and it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. And so, what year would this have been? This would have been at least 2016, 2017. So over about 10 years or just under 10 years ago. And someone who accompanied us, a former student, came along with us because he was interested in coming. He had his band's demo, and I remember him saying, "Oh, I use this app to master it." And I'm like, "What?" And I wasn't aware of it. But now, years later, actually, even far back as 2016, 17, there were AI apps which were used to master music. And he and my friend Pete were basically debating that and saying, well, what's the best one? And Pete, obviously being a pro and one of the best in the world, says, look, if you can afford it, and if you can't master a song, and you can afford the small price it is brilliant. Like, in terms of putting it in people's hands for commercial use, it's fine. It will do a job. Obviously, for the likes of Pete, who's got the ears of a dachshund, he can pick up things like neither one of us can. So he's kind of making the point of, it will do, it's fine, but if you really want it to sound the business, then give it to a mastering engineer. So it helps, that helps. There are apps, I think I mentioned Producer, was it IO, whatever the domain is. Really, really good app for producing and generating music. I prefer it to Suno, because Producer just gives you a little bit more hands-on experience, and just you can tailor the music to be a little bit more specific to what you want. I just find the results to be I can use the results, if that makes sense, in that one. There's the app, I'm sure you're aware, with Brian, called was it Moises app? The Moises one where it tracks track separator, so you can put MP3 or WAV, and it will AI separate the tracks. I know they use that a more sophisticated version on the Beatles documentary Get Back, because they obviously took the master tapes and they wanted to mix them, and they've done it to an amazing job. So you've got that app, which I know musicians use. I've used that and I loved it. As soon as I found out that there's an app which you can actually take the recordings and you can separate the sound, so I got really giddy. It's like, do you mean I can go into, like, I don't have access to master tapes, I can go in and I can listen isolated parts? Yeah. And then I think, well, does that mean I can also get rid of tracks and I can use the songs I've been jamming to as backing tracks. Yeah, and I'm like mind blown. They obviously use that on Logic now, so Logic also has a stem separator built in. Whether or not it's connected to Moises, I'm not sure. So you've got this is where I think, Brian, where AI helps musicians and helps them still be creative. Are there any? I mean, is there anything that you used AI for in terms of your music making or how you engage with music?
Yeah, I always ask AI if it's worth being a musician, and
Does it
it
laugh at
gives
you?
me, yeah, yeah. Obviously, it'll say, "Look, I'm just giving you the information that I have on the wonderful internet, and to be objectively honest, it's not. It's not very financially viable. So, yeah, that's my way of combating AI in music. Um, no, I started using it towards the end of when I was teaching in 2024 and last year 25, and it was a bit of a godsend when when it came to lesson planning.
Mm,
You spent
mm,
hours doing that, and as much as every teacher, I felt like everything that I planned, I put my heart and soul into it. the The reality is, if you have 80 to 90% of your students who are beginners, you're going to be teaching the same songs. You're going to be
yeah,
teaching the same techniques, and there's no real, it's not worth personalizing every single lesson plan. So I just take all the PDFs that I've downloaded, bought over the years, chuck it into Claude, ChatGPT, or whatever, and then it puts it all into a PDF, like one whole one. And now that's a very, I think, a very valid way and a very reasonable use of uh, using AI as your organizer, and what it did was, and this was towards me running my school. So I was struggling, and I made the decision to step away from teaching, but it made the last couple of months just so much more relaxing and relieving, where instead of spending 3 hours the night before, I just say, "Here, I'm going to give you this," and I feel so much better. I have the energy to actually play with you, and we
mhm,
interpret the music, and that speeds the process up. And then I'll tell my student, if it's the primary school student, year 3 or 4, they're 8, 9, 10 years old. They already know how to use a computer. So I'll say, here's every PDF that here's every bit of music that I was going to teach you over the next 3 weeks. But if you want to get started on it, go ahead.
mhm.
And 1 out of 50 would do it because the other were lazy asses. But you know, those were things that would have been very useful when I was, burnt out or struggling, or the hours I saved, I would go sleep. I know that there's always been concerns that with generative AI music, it's the death of music, right? In all honesty, music has been dying for decades now. Live music has been dying since the 80s. It's still dying. It's kind of like cricket, The cricket has been dying.
Mm.
Tennis has been dying. Who is dying? But from my
I like how you do that. You throw this like, this is dying, this is dying. I mean, really, who is dying? And then you're not giving me enough time to digest who is dying. Like,
yeah,
from a moral and a philosophical point of view, like it's the pearls of wisdom you have here, Brian, are who yeah, and that could be another who is dying. We look at all the stats of who is dying. Are people dying more than others? Are people are people dying less? Could we how could we die a little slower? It's all these things. What could make the world? Yeah,
yeah.
that's
Which
that's
music
another.
is dying? Whose music? What art is dying? Is it Picasso? Is it Van Gogh? Which ear is
Oh, now
dying?
that oh,
That
damn,
sort of thing.
that would be a
Yeah.
wicked idea.
Mm.
Like, yeah, that would be good.
That's
Rather
the
than
next show.
people,
Who's
that's
dying?
who's done. Well, maybe not people because that's a bit more morbid, or maybe
Yeah,
for
yeah.
maybe for
AI
our
people.
patron AI
Yeah.
people, maybe for our Patreon subscribers. But yeah, in terms of music. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Um, Back to being serious. The people who have been streaming our show, I'm sure you've caught up with the humor, but you know, a lot of people have been saying, "Oh, live music, is dead." When piracy came about, LimeWire and Pirate Bay. That was the death of music. When YouTube became a thing, that was death of music. Instagram Shorts, that sort of thing. But the last three concerts I've been to have been of my three favorite acoustic instrumental guitarists: Tommy Emmanuel, Mike Dawes, and Callum Graham. And when generative music AI became such a prominent part of the music world, I was very concerned that as much as my music career, my guitar playing career never quite got going, I was genuinely concerned that instrumental music, guitar, piano, whatever, was going to be the first to go. But the last three shows I've gone to from these guys, they've been sold out. 2,500 people in small theaters, Sydney Opera House. And half of the people that are turning up are young people around my age, mid-20s, early 20s. And that sort of showed me that music's not dead yet, you know?
Mm.
And, Mike Dawes, he's a funny fella. He kind of looks like, I'll say Al Yankovic. I was going to say something else that will cause a big uproar. I'll but if you search him up, Mike, and if people search, you'll know what I'm talking about. But he would always joke, like he'd say, "Look, I have my CDs here. If you don't have CDs, that's all right. I have my USB sticks. If you don't, you can download my music. I have a solution to everything. So please do not download my music through AI means." And he'd make this joke, and then he'd show how he'd create the music, how he'd break it down, every finger, bass, melody, rhythm, all that sort of stuff. And leaving those shows, there was a genuine feeling. I think everyone went, you know what? There's something still worth going to see someone stand up and just listen to them for 2 hours and tell stories and all that. And I think we are still seeing festivals like Glastonbury being sold out, Splendor, Coachella, all that sort of stuff. We still get people turning up to that, So whilst the concerns with AI music are real and genuine, and we need to find a way to put it in a place that can exist with music as a whole, um, I think we are seeing more and more people turn up again to live music wherever they can, wherever they can afford it. Um, People are still turning up to big pop stars. Dare I say it? Look, I know Ed Sheeran is along with Taylor Swift and maybe Sabrina Carpenter, the top three pop stars over this decade. But for me, Ed Sheeran is like the old school singer guitar player,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and he recently had his tour in Australia. I think he did 7 or 8 shows, and I think he sold out all of them, and the numbers were very similar to Taylor Swift's concerts. And for the most part, Taylor Swift is just one singer as well. Like, yeah, she has
Mm,
backup dancers, but she's not a band. Like, she doesn't
mm.
have 5 guitar players, a drummer. It's a track, backing track, and her dancers, and it's her. Love her or hate her, got to give kudos to that. And if we have pop stars like them still playing around and selling out, 700,000 people turned up to all their shows, all Ed Sheeran shows, then I think that still says that people want to listen and watch a real person. So, that tells me that, if someone listens to an acoustic guitar track that was clearly written by an AI prompt, it becomes way too over repetitive. There's no heart to it. It's essentially cocktail hour. Maybe that's the use for it. If bars and pubs, they can't afford a real musician, rather than them saying we're going to, come play. You can play a stand up here and we'll pay you with, a drink and peanuts, sometimes actually peanuts. Maybe bars and venues just stop doing that and go, we can go on with that, but we'll go on for another 3 hours. Like, the whole play for exposure would just stop it, get rid of it. If you can't afford a real musician, if you can't afford to pay, just play the AI music that creates a vibe, and that will do. And then the venues who can afford, they say, you know what, we're going to pay you a good rate, and we want you to give the crowd a good time. And you know,
That's it.
that'll be interesting to see. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
unis will, libraries will play. You type in and say, study music. Study music's already, just it's just sounds, it's just calming
That's been
sounds.
AI'd for
Yeah.
ages. There's
And
I'm
it's not bad. Like if you wanna drift off to sleep, then yeah, you put on a playlist like that. Like you don't put on a sleeping or calming playlist to go, "Oh, I really care about this melody and rhythm," and or maybe some people do. Whoever
yeah.
those people are, you're fucking weird, but oh dear.
I see your point there. They basically venues can save money by not paying a PRS license and going, "We're just gonna be playing our AI stuff." But that
Yeah,
money
focus on the
we can
food.
yeah, well, that money will either go I mean, if they're particularly greedy, it can go back in their pockets, or if they care enough, they go, "Actually, when we do book someone to play, we can pay him a little more, but like you said, the remit is we want you to bring an atmosphere. We want we want you to bring our clientele in and making them feel really, really good." So there are positives. I was gonna kind of, ask your closing thoughts on AI, and we kind of merged into that anyway. So yeah, so
Ooh.
number one, there could be
Closing thoughts.
that's awesome. That is awesome. And cheesy as well. Awesome and cheesy. I mean, that I think that describes you perfectly well, doesn't it, Brian? Awesome and cheesy. So using AI to kind of free up funds/time/energy to do the things that we don't want to do or we spend time doing, and then we focus on some of the things we do like to do, which is what it was intended to be, but then it grew into a monster because people started abusing AI's capabilities. Um, I think that's a given, and also I really think there needs to be. I mean, the AI companies won't give a lick about this, but having responsible use and at least educating, children and educating younger generation and just in educating people to say this AI thing, we don't rely on it. It's something to use, but we don't rely on it. Now, it's not going to be for everyone. There will be people who will go, no, I'm going to use AI for everything, and I don't care. I want to have an AI teacher. I want to listen to AI music. I want to watch AI created content. I want to drive a car which has been AI designed. There will be people who wouldn't care a jot about that, and that's fine. You do you. But the thing that we in the creative industry and the people working in there, Brian, need to just go in and say, we still need to educate people. We still need to show people that um people come first, and you need to be always um uh mindful of engaging with art and engaging with creation from people, because at some point, if you turn your back to that, then you yourself might find yourself out of a job because AI has taken it. AI has deemed you unemployable because you cost too much money and they can buy a program to do your job. So there's a certain shared responsibility for this. Um, I'm very encouraged with what I'm seeing so far on the ground, that people are rejecting it, and from all of the grassroots venues I've been to in the last couple of years or so, and even some of the major gigs, you're quite right. There's still a sizable audience, and if people are going to see Mike Dawes, if people are still going to see Ed Sheeran selling out venues, Taylor Swift, that's good. That is good. We need that. And but we also need people to engage with artists who are in the lower to mid tier, who, are just as good, if not sometimes better. We still need them to be supported as well, and people to engage with that, much like I did when I was younger, listening and getting into music. I was into the classic bands, but I was also into the bands and the artists of today, and I wanted to support them. And those bands and artists which I supported are now part of the established, music industry, which is fantastic. So we still need that, don't we? Um, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and I mean, in terms of, I think you mentioned it earlier on in the chat about copyright and about and intellectual property and all of those aspects. Well, that's probably a fight that either the music industry go in with, but it sounds to me like they're almost going like they often do. They arrive too late to the party, and then they go, "Oh, okay, well, we'll just work out a deal which suits them." But actually, in hindsight, if they had have entered the AI conversation way before it became prominent, they could have put in these copyright laws, slash they could have earned more money. They could have earned a lot more money, and they could have really got in and said, "You can do an AI generated Led Zeppelin, of course you can, but it's going to cost you this amount of money." So, typical industry, bolting the door while the horses ran off, whatever the saying is. But tightening up a lot of the copyrights and the intellectual property would be something that we really need to do, because it just safeguards intellectual property that artists create. And it means that when you put your work out there, it's not just gobbled up in the algorithm and forgotten about. So, I mean, is there any thoughts from yourself, Brian, in terms of AI for the future? AI for now, AI for the future, AI for good, AI for bad? What do you got?
Yeah, no, just on the copyright, that's beyond my understanding. But for the most part, the music world has been quite reactive to changes in the world, right? Like something happens and shit, we got a problem. Okay, how do we deal with it? Or and it's not just with copyright or piracy, software technology. It's you know you pointed out about how important it is to educate young artists, everyone involved in music, particularly the people making it, on what AI is, how it's affecting the world at the moment, how it's affecting music creation, art at the moment. And for the first time, I guess in this first time really, the educational side, the conversations being had. Young musicians can learn more about what is AI and what is not, tell the
Mm,
difference, and listen to both types of music. There's plenty of music out there that's still done by real musicians. I'm sure their parents still have at least one CD player or whatever, or just, I know we've shit on Spotify, but just go on Spotify, type in your favorite artist, whether it's Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, or some indie artist, and listen to the real music that's there, and then listen to something that's done by a computer and try to tell the difference. You know,
that's good.
and
I like
then
that.
and then perhaps find a way to use AI that makes it more creative, or really reflects you as an artist. And I know that this might be the most obvious comparison, but look at what James Cameron did with T2 and then Avatar. You watched that, and everyone knew going into the first Avatar that it was going to be all CGI. There's no way you can watch that and go, like, your brain's not going, "Oh, yeah, that clearly is CGI. Yeah, that ocean's not there." You're watching and going, "Fuck, this feels real." Like, you go to IMAX or wherever, even watching it, like he said, you gotta go to the cinema and watch it. Like, I got bored in the last Avatar movie, but I still felt like, "Wow, this looks so good." The story was boring, but, like, it
Mm,
was a gorgeous movie. And then I just watched Supergirl and Stranger Things season 5. My God, like, it was so obvious that they were standing in front of a green screen. So
yeah.
when it's done well, and that's a bit of a blanket term, but when it's done well, who like, it doesn't matter if it's AI or human created in that bubble. Now, when it comes to how to distribute it and who owns the rights and how to pay artists fairly, there's a lot of politics in that, and that's very tough to get into. We can
Yeah.
sit here and say, well, the person who wrote the music deserves most of the profits. Well, unfortunately, in this world, you can't have your cake and eat it as well, and that's the reality, and it's
Mm,
tough. There's nothing at the moment we can do about it. So what we can do is just teach our young students, young kids, here's what you can do, here's how you can use it, then make your choice. And from a mental health side of things, I think it does perhaps maybe take the anxiety out of preparation, planning, and organizing, and maybe things become a bit more clearer. Maybe you
mm,
can become a
mm,
bit more proactive in organizing and outlining what type of musician you want to be, your identity as a musician, um, what gigs you want to do. Maybe AI prompts will tell you, these are the venues that you can go to that will actually give you a chance. It may be able to filter out thousands, millions of musicians who have been open, who have, you go on Rolling Stone, guitar magazines, they've talked about their journeys, and then they come up with an idea, say, these are how these musicians had success. This might help you. And
Mhm,
at
mhm.
least it gives them a chance, I think, and
Yeah.
that's something that musicians for a long time never had. It was just, yeah, write music, go on vibes. We've talked about that and just hope someone finds you. That doesn't work anymore, maybe, well, most of the time, maybe if you're in the woods, who knows, a bear finds you.
Yeah,
Weird Al
but then
Yankovic finds you.
the bear eats you, so you don't actually get the exposure you want. Well, you get the exposure, but it's to your insides rather than actually your artistic endeavor, isn't it? That's one of the greats. Shout out Grizzly Bear. You made a really good point about in terms of the mental health aspect, and I think it's like, we can use it. I mean, I use certain AI apps for my kind of mental health side because it's like I can't afford to have the therapist on call to say I need to talk, and then no. So I use a really good app where I can just kind of put some thoughts in, and it regurgitates it in a proper way, and I go, oh, okay, it's good. So it's got those benefits in terms of AI for music for mental health. Um, it's very difficult because it's a narrative that you have to swap from because, the fact that AI exists causes so much distress for people to say, "How am I gonna earn a living? How can I get by in this world if I have this huge thing which is basically gonna take over majority of what I do?" Um, but as we said before, the initial signs are people are rejecting AI for the reasons that the big tech companies don't want us to do, if that makes sense. So you can use AI, like you said, in terms of taking the sting out of things, or even if you're under a deadline and you've got to, write something and you're like, I am stuck on this particular middle eight. I have no idea. There's no shame at all. And just putting a prompt into producer or Suno or if it's a lyric, just go in, just put that prompt in and go, right, well, what does it say back? And you can look at it and go, perfect, that's it, great. Right, I can go and do that one. Or you can go, well, not quite. So it can actually someone put it to me actually, if you're using AI tools for, say, songwriting or creating, and AI is essentially that other person, that co-writer in the room that you can go in and go, right, well, what do you think about this? And it gives you the feedback and says, well, maybe you should try this. And I love co-writing. I love collaborations, whether it be for delivering lessons, planning, teaching, writing, composing, improvising. I love collaborating with people. And in the absence of actual people, I find that AI has been very good in that sense. I just need to learn how to switch off of that little mode in my brain going, oh, it's gonna take music over, it's gonna be really bad. But I mean, that's a struggle that we all have. But I think if you look at it objectionally and say AI, like you said, AI can be a wonderful co-creative tool, then we can use it for that one. Um, and that's what it's really about, isn't it?
Yeah, the what I'm getting at, like what you said just then, Mike, is that it, it what we're trying to talk about is just how AI can benefit you as an individual because, you have a lot more knowledge about what's going on from the outside. For me, it's, I'm trying to look at AI and see how can it make my life better? What can I ignore and what can I use? And like
Mm,
you said, you know, musicians for centuries just don't make money like the likes of Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, or even the ones below them, that tier, who are comfortable and can make a living. They're in the top 0.001%. So,
yeah, exactly.
um, and let's say if you do work with a company who says we need to, we're going to write some ads or something, or we have some radio spots, we need some music for it. Here's the vibe we want. Here's the theme. We need it by the end of the week. Now, if you're struggling or if you're stressed about that, yeah, you go to a prompt, get it done, and then you put in your own. You twist it around. You interpret it yourself. You might rewrite a few things. Like it's very easy to say, "Oh, embrace AI." You know, it's here. You can't get rid of it. The concerns, the stresses for the individual artists, young artists, struggling artists who have already put their blood, sweat, and tears into years and years of trying to get their music out, only for this to just throw them and just it's like running into a brick wall. They're real. Okay, so in all seriousness, I'm not dismissing them. The one thing that is going to be very difficult to do is that we kind of have to accept that it is here. But that's that's a step to moving forward and go, okay, well, if we can't beat it, what can we do to make it work for us? And, the suggestions that Mike has talked about using the apps to help with splitting tracks and
mm.
a bit of mixing as well, that's been done with programs for 2 decades now, 3 decades nearly. The administrative side, that's something that musicians, even the best great musicians, they're fucking horseshit at it. Like they don't know what they're doing about it. They say you gotta be a businessman. Like it's all about being a business. Like okay, um, go on and like well, like you just got to market yourself. Like AI tools, ChatGPT will have far more business marketing knowledge than the average musician will. So use that to your advantage. And I'll tell you what, it may actually help you make some money. Like maybe not selling your music and getting a stream, but you know, selling those little token cards. I've seen in the UK a lot of indie bands now at the merch desk. They have their token cards with player profiles and you scan a QR code and it takes them to their whole discography that they can download. Those things are cool. Like those things are basically just the QR version of USB sticks these days. Um, I've seen a lot of a couple of indie bands here in Australia. They're starting to do that as well, but it's like behind the scenes where you can get a raw, unedited track. Like you scan the QR code and it says, "Here's the raw acoustic version that we didn't polish and master, but you heard the finished product on stage." So, and I've seen a couple bands who do this, but they have a feature on their NFT cards or USB sticks where if you go on and you scan the QR code, it takes you to a live recording of the show you just went to. So they have photographers and videographers, they live stream it, and the moment the show finishes, you can actually download that live content, and that's so cool
Yeah,
because you
yeah.
know, and AI will help just fast track that process. And
Mhm.
I feel like the younger generation who you said are rejecting AI because they just don't want a bar of it. They want to see more vulnerability, honest, authentic, genuine music, and just and the people behind the music as well. We've talked about that in previous shows where we're trying to encourage people to see the artist behind the music, not just the musician, and that's it. Well, there are people who genuinely want to hear those mistakes and, maybe if they're singing an emotional song, like to hear that. And if there's a missed note on the guitar, whatever, they want to hear that because it makes them feel like, I'm part of that. And it means the experience of going to a show was as real as anything. So, it's who knows? We'll have this conversation next year, and there'll be about 50,000 changes, and all of a sudden we'll go, ah, shit. Everything we said last year was fucking bogus. Or we might go, you know what? Things are okay. Like I have my cake. I won't eat it, but I still have my cake. That sort of thing.
Mm.
Who knows? We might become, skyscraper window cleaners. Those people, they're the real heroes of the world. They get paid a lot. It's also a great, great job for introverts as well. So I'm looking forward to that.
Or perverts.
And on that bombshell, Jeremy Clarkson, hello. Anything else you want to add, Mike, that is inappropriate?
Maybe not that one. Oh, but me and my mouth. No, I'm good. I was about to say I have to I have to head off soon, so I'm good,
Okay,
mate.
cool. I want to like firstly, I want to say thank you so much for hosting today's show, Mike, and anyone who's made it to the end of the end of the show. I want you to head over to Mike's profiles. You know, he does a talk show, radio show all about education, teachers, really trying to shine a spotlight on teachers and their struggles and the concerns that they have with students and the mental health of teachers, supporting them as well. He's going to launch a show very soon, all AI generated, of course, of course.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And the show notes here, I actually write the show notes for all our episodes. Even though Spotify does have an AI generated feature, I go, nope, nope, nope. I'm going to write them. That's probably why we won't have millions of streams because Spotify's caught on that. It's like, oh, you're not using our AI feature. Well,
You're
stuff
not
you.
Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
gonna promote you because you're not using our features, so you can just go, "Boop."
Oh,
Yeah,
balls, you know. So,
absolutely.
anyways, no, I really appreciate it, Michael. And, these are, honest conversations that I hope that everyone can have. And there's two sides of it. There are some things that are clearly black and white, like, artists deserve to be paid what they're worth and the work that they put in. So that's a clear thing. But, you know, things are very murky at the moment. So, have these discussions from both sides and, educate yourself on everything, find everything you can, about the topic and, find ways to make it work for you. And we suggested a couple of ways to do that today. So, um, no, appreciate it, Mike. Appreciate your time and commiserations to England for being knocked out. And yeah, talking about the Ashes, not the World Cup, or both.
Well, give us time. Give us time. We already stuffed up the New Zealand series, didn't we? So give us time. We got what DR Congo. So yeah, well, you never know. You never know. There's been some big surprises. Netherlands have been knocked out. Who else has been knocked out?
I think it didn't.
Germany's been knocked out.
Yeah,
So
that was huge, huge.
massive.
Wow.
So I wouldn't. I would say be. I think we'd be careful. I know it's DR Congo, but mate, it could be another surprise. You never know.
Yeah, yeah. This World Cup has been so hard to tip against. I've lost so much money. We should. That's why you should gamble unresponsibly. Actually, maybe no, please don't. Being a musician's already a gamble, anyways.
It is.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks a lot.